Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. I am Dr. Marianne Trent and I'm a qualified clinical psychologist. I'm a qualified clinical psychologist with a fractured elbow, which was not on the plan, wasn't on the agenda. And so this episode is going to be a little bit shorter as, it's thrown my life slightly into chaos. So I hope you'll find this quick overview useful about how you go about becoming a clinical psychologist in the UK. That is, if you are a UK resident. I will aim to do future content for how you do conversions in future. But if that is of interest to you, you could listen to an episode I did with Michaela Thomas, which is episode 61 of the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. So I hope you'll find this really useful. We have, of course, got compassionate Q&As you can catch up on. And the next one is coming to you on the 2nd of May. Watch out on my socials for those. All of the replays are easily available from my YouTube, Dr. Marianne Trent. And if you're watching on YouTube now, please do subscribe and like. Hope you find this useful. If you've got any ideas for future podcast episodes, then please do let me know. So whilst I'm waiting for people to join us, I thought I would briefly go through A, who I am, and B, what the process is for becoming a clinical psychologist in the UK. If you're watching on YouTube, why not subscribe? That would be good. I will briefly go through what the process is to become a clinical psychologist in the UK. So it is a 3-year professional doctorate qualification. The majority of places are NHS funded at band 6 level, but it is also possible on some courses. I think there's maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 courses that accept self-funding, but that's not done without due consideration, because you'd need to pay the expenses, which I think are about 30 grand a year, I think. And you'd need to also pay your own living expenses to be able to afford food, rent, fuel, all of those things. So it's not a small amount of money. Sometimes people's employers ask them to, they agree to fund it for them. So that also is a possibility if you're not feeling particularly flush. But even then, even if you want to self-fund, it's still incredibly competitive to get a place, and they're not going to let you get onto that doctorate if you haven't got the appropriate skills, qualifications, and expertise. So by the time you have an interview for the doctorate in clinical psychology, whether that is self-funded or whether that is taught, you will have an undergraduate degree which offers you the graduate basis for registration with the British Psychological Society. You may also see that called the GBC, Graduate Basis for Certification, I think, something like that. But it changed a few years ago. So you might see it GBC, you might see it GBR, and both is fine. But yes, that's not enough usually. Usually you may have done some additional qualifications. You may have done a postgraduate certificate. You may have done a master's. Not essential, but always useful to evidence that you're able to strengthen your academic experience. You are likely pretty much essentially going to needed to have done some element of research or dissemination of your abilities, which highlights why you're going to be a brilliant clinical psychologist. And what else? Relevant experience. So I got on to training in 2008 and I graduated in 2002. And it wasn't all pedal to the metal. I did do a little bit of backpacking around the world for 6 months and I saved up to do that. There was a fair amount of sitting in a hammock and drinking lovely cocktails, but there was also a lot of hard work across a variety of different clinical populations where I was able to hone my craft. So that is a little bit about the route. Once you're on the doctorate in clinical psychology, you do that for 3 years. You have to pass a variety of clinical placements. You usually have between 5 to 6 4 to 6 clinical placements, and you'll do assignments during that time, and then you need to pass each clinical placement, and you also have assignments and a piece of unique research to do, which composes your thesis. It's a lot to balance, it's a lot to juggle, but if you were not aware of that, I hope that's useful. But if you found this helpful, please do consider leaving me a testimonial that I can use on socials, or drop me something anonymously, that's great. Or on LinkedIn, you can write me a recommendation. If we're not already connected on there, I think you might need to send me a connection request too, to demonstrate that you think what I've got to say is useful and supportive. Like I said, the podcast can be really useful, especially the interviews episodes and the interview prep episodes. So 65 is learn and revise better. 64 is preparing for interview success. Optimally prepare for interviews is episode 10. So 10, 64 and 65. There's also other replays that you can watch on my YouTube channel, Dr. Marianne Trent. If you think you might find it helpful to come aboard to the Aspiring Psychologist membership, there is no minimum requirement for you to stay. If you want to just come for a month and see if it's a good fit for you, that's absolutely okay too. There'll be links in my bio for how you can do that. And like I said, the Clinical Psychologist Collective and the Aspiring Psychologist Collective make excellent reads as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that useful. Thank you also for being part of my world and trusting you to bring you what you need to know when you need to know it. If you've got any questions or ideas for future episodes, please do get in touch. I will look forward to catching up with you for the next episode of the podcast, which is available to you from 6 a.m. on Mondays, by which time I hope my elbow will be a little bit more healed. Take care and thank you for being part of my world.
If you're looking to become a psychologist,